everybody. This is Rose Odette with the Michigan Innovation Podcast. And today we have Sabrina Jordan here with 8-Bit. And we're so excited to have her with us today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How about
Very,
you?
I'm great. Thank you. I'm very excited that you're here. And thank you for taking the drive on over to Cadillac to do this podcast. And what we do to begin with is we always like to know a little bit about the entrepreneur as a person. And so, Sabrina, can you share with us any insights to who you are, what's your background, and kind of like what makes you tick?
Yeah, absolutely. I have lived in northern Michigan most of my life. We spent a few years of my childhood down in St. Croix. My dad was an air traffic controller, and Hurricane Hugo in 1989 tore the roof off our house.
Wow.
So we did have to move, and my mom's family is from the Traverse City area. So my sister and my mom and I were evacuated out of St. Croix, and we went up to northern Michigan and stayed with my grandma. And my dad stayed behind for another 9 months. He volunteered to help with the relief efforts and get the planes in, the supplies, everything they needed in exchange for a transfer to whatever airport he wanted. So even though the Traverse City Airport had a really, really long waiting list for air traffic controllers, he was able to skip the line, and that's how we ended up in Traverse City.
Wow, that's a great story. Well, thank goodness, because we really love you guys being in Traverse City.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is interesting. Wow. Do you ever go back?
We did actually. We had a big family trip shortly before the shutdowns in 2020, and that was the first time that I had been back there. And it was very, very cool. We got to check out the airport, which has been restored, and we actually found that base housing that we lived in and found the shell of the house that we had lived in, and nobody had rebuilt it.
Wow.
And
That
it
had to
was
be a
just
blast from your
it
past.
was crazy. It was surrounded by jungle and completely overgrown. And we actually found a very, very, very old glass prescription bottle with my name on it.
Oh, wow.
So
That
we knew
is
we had the
crazy.
right
That
house.
was the right place.
Yeah.
Well, wow, what a story. That's great. That's very interesting. Well, that's a very cool origin story and how you ended up in Traverse City and, family ties have a way of bringing us all back to Northern Michigan too. And so let's talk a little bit about 8-Bit Insights and what's that origin story?
Yeah, absolutely. It actually started a long, long time ago. At my first real serious job, I worked for an insurance company, and they had a book club of sorts for the employees. And one of the books that we read was called The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack. And if you haven't read it, it's essentially about a business that wasn't doing very well. It was kind of failing. The owners wanted to get out and they were just going to shut it down, but the employees bought it instead. So it turned into an employee owned company. And as a result of that, they were able to completely turn it around. Everybody really had a stake in the business. And they gamified a lot of the KPIs and the data around the business to get employees invested and educated them on how the company worked. And that model of employee ownership really appealed to me even back then. And then we fast forward later in my career, I worked for a couple of years for a small consulting company, a small data consulting company. And they embodied a lot of what I wanted to work for and how I wanted to work. It felt like the perfect fit for me. It was extremely challenging, it was extremely rewarding. There was a ton of variety, and they really put the people first in many cases. So I loved working for that company and thought that maybe I had finally found my forever fit. And 2 years later, that company was acquired by a much bigger company, a much larger consulting company. And that culture fit wasn't the same.
Mm,
And that really
mm.
really led me to want to create my own business, to create an employee owned business that would offer incredible value for all of the employees, all of the clients, and really be values driven and values first. So being able to put people first is one of my top values for this company, and that's what inspired me to create this 8-bit
Wow,
insights.
what a great story. So that is going through culture change when a company is acquired by another. All of a sudden, the culture changes overnight, doesn't it?
Yeah, the rules changed, the culture changed, all the things we had gotten used to changed, and we went from being very agile and having a lot of different projects to sort of like one team, and you could do one type of project.
Okay, so variety was lost a bit.
Yeah, for me it was.
Yeah, I hear you there. Well, as an employee-owned and operated company, how does 8-Bit Insights really influence its approach to innovation and client solutions?
Yeah, our goal is to have everyone embrace that ownership mentality. Help others grow, help grow your own skills. We want clients to succeed for the sake of the business and for the sake of ourselves because we own this company, we're working on this company for ourselves, and we take pride in that, and we want to be the best that we can be. So that employee ownership structure means that we can profit share back with our employees, and the growth of the business really rests on everybody's shoulders. So that's where that ownership mentality comes in. That's where people can say, if I want a bigger bonus, I can work harder for it, or I can innovate for it, or I can find a way to make that happen. And
Really digs from deep inside.
yeah,
You really get into the core of an individual and really bring the best because they're working for something more than just a paycheck. They're working for something they own.
absolutely. And if they can guide themselves, they're already more invested in the results.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of culture that I want to be a part of. I want to be surrounded by people who also want to invest in themselves and invest in the business and really own their destiny.
hmm I really appreciate that. I totally believe in development too. You know, it's so important to uh, continue to grow. And really, it's up to each individual on what do they want to grow,
Yeah,
how do they want to grow, what skills do they want to develop. And I really, really respect that. Like, who can't respect that? That's really cool. Well, can you share a specific example where 8-Bit Insights implemented a creative solution to address one of your clients' complex data challenges?
yeah. One of the solutions that we came up with was a forecasting model. So there are, in the software that I was using for this project, Power BI, there are some automated forecasting models where there's a sort of black box process where you're not exactly sure how it was figured out, but it will spit out a forecast and tell you what your growth could look like.
Hmm.
The issue here was that it wasn't transparent enough, and the client had a lot of, well, what if we did this? What if we did that scenarios? And so what I was able to do instead was to come up with a custom model for a forecast where we tried to account for all of those different what if scenarios. So we had some custom parameters that the client could change, like what if we hired 3 new people this year? What if we hired 3 new people every year?
Well, that sounds like scenario planning.
Yeah, yeah,
Really interesting.
yep. But it tied directly into a forecast of would
Was
they
it
achieve,
financial forecast like
yeah,
revenue?
mm-hmm,
Awesome.
yep, would they achieve their goal? And being transparent really helps earn the respect and trust of people who are looking at that forecast. If I'm looking at the automated forecast, I have no idea where that came from. And so this more complex model did have a lot more to it, but it really helps you trust that the data is correct and trust that you know what's being impacted when different things change.
That really, I'm sure it meant a lot to the people that used the forecast because it gave them some insights prior to making some pretty important decisions. You know, hiring
Yeah,
3 people, that's a big commitment. So having their eyes on the data and understanding how these changes would impact, those are people's lives.
yeah,
not only financially. I think that's where the values come in. You
Hmm.
mentioned values a lot, and I can see that shining through that example myself. Very cool. So, how do you foster a culture of continuous improvement with an innovation within your team? How do you keep the innovation going? How do you cultivate that, KPI or what is it? Can I continuing and never ending improvement? Can I? That's it.
Yeah,
How do you do that?
we embrace learning, and it's going to be part of the benefits package at 8-bit. So planning on professional development funds and professional development time is a really, really, really important part of 8-bit insights. With consultancies, I don't know if you know, they often use a measure called utilization. And utilization is typically measured as what percentage of your time was billable to a client. But what we're doing is more like that small consultancy that I mentioned in the past. We want to include anything that helps the business, anything that grows the business, and anything that helps you yourself. So things like webinars, blog posts, taking the time to help your coworkers, that's obviously going to take time away from yourself, but it's a huge important part of that consistently evolving culture is training other people to do what you can do, helping them out when they run into something that's a problem. And then that personal professional improvement and making sure that there's a set block of time specifically for that. And we believe that that helps people become empowered to take over their professional development and then accountable for all of the different ways that they can help the business and grow the business. And that's going to keep us continuously improving.
Oh, that is so, it reminds me of a wheel that's in alignment. When you focus completely on billable hours or utilization, it kind of creates a lopsided uh, view of the world, and you end up maybe overemphasizing or I wouldn't say over, but underemphasizing things that are critical, like Stephen Covey says, sharpening the saw, you know, what, all of that. So I think that's another points to that really value-based company. And so I think that is really cool. What role does client collaboration play in your innovation process, and how do you integrate client feedback into developing new services and solutions?
Yeah, client collaboration means everything. They know their problems the best, and everything that we do needs to be problem driven and not pattern driven. If I walk into a client and I'm just applying the same patterns that I've always applied, that may not meet their needs. It might not solve their problems. So, collaborating with them to fully understand everything about the challenges that they are facing and their budgetary concerns and their timeline concerns and what the future looks like, those are all really, really important to listen to and not make any assumptions about. And so I think that this really helps us demonstrate excellence with humility, because when you're listening instead of assuming, when you're hearing about the problems instead of saying, this is how I would solve it, this is how I've solved it before, then
Hmm.
you're really going to make a better outcome for them and a better outcome for you too.
Well, I think that would make a great tagline for your business. It's not the process. It's really focusing on the problem at hand. And I really remember a lot of days in my world of IT and creating the electronic medical record that I created that, I would bring in consultants from time to time. And it is not one size fits all when you're doing anything in IT. It
Right.
always depends.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate that. But I have had people come in and want to do the one size fits all, and it just doesn't work. It really, really doesn't work. So tell me about your a time when you're balancing your standardization, your data processing, flexibility. How do you handle really that type of thing when you have to balance the needs of, you want to use standardized methodologies, but you still need to be flexible. Sometimes standards aren't flexible, but you have to adhere to them. That creates kind of a rock between two hard places situation. Do you ever run into that?
Yes, I would say that that is a problem to face every time. The important part is to build with intention. So if you plan for the flexibility based on requirements and client circumstances, you're going to have a better outcome. Looking at where they want to be in the future is one way to plan for that flexibility and embed that from the very beginning of the process. Standardized processes and clean data become inherently flexible. When you have messy data and lots of manual workarounds, that's when you have the opposite. So, in some ways, it is sort of that rock and a hard place situation where you need to plan for what you don't know yet or try to be flexible with what you're doing. But in other ways, it's very synergistic and you can get that all of the benefits of flexibility just by adhering to those practices and making sure that your data quality is very, very high, that you're adhering to the data governance standards that your organization has in place. Those things will all help with flexibility actually down the road.
And I can see that. And one of the things that comes to mind for me is, well, let's say you work with a client, even this forecasting client, and because you we're able to give them some eyes into the future, some better data, better analytics, looking at data. And all of a sudden they start scaling and they really, what strategies do you employ to really make sure that these innovative solutions are able to scale and are really sustainable over time?
Asking about the organization growth and their plans for the future, even if I'm talking about a very specific project with them or a very specific solution for them, asking about that future growth um, can be very, very helpful for scaling up. Uh, the expected duration for the solution is also sometimes something that I might ask. How long do you expect to need this for?
Hmm.
How long is this report going to be relevant for? Is this, hey, this is one of our BHAGs, our big, hairy, audacious goals, and we're going
Right.
to be looking at it for 5 years and then we might never touch that report again? Or is it something that we really are planning to use indefinitely forever? Building with the future in mind, we can comment the code and we can document really thoroughly. And importantly, with 8-bit, we focus on education and training. Clients who understand the solution, they can troubleshoot it and they can add on to it. We focus on client equity and inclusion, making sure that we're embracing their diversity and their lived experiences when we're doing this training. So we're bringing it down to their level. We're helping them understand how everything works. Even if we aren't the one working with them in the future, they'll be better educated to work with somebody else or better educated to ask us back and they'll know what they want. So we want to coach to where they are at, and that's going to help them scale up in the future because they're going to know more about what they need.
Wow, that makes so much sense. And everyone wants to scale. They're hoping to grow. And so it's nice to work with a company that like 8-bit that will keep that growth in mind and to build for the future. That's really important to any business owner or decision maker, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes there are constraints that don't allow for that flexibility, usually budgetary or something like that. You can put something together very small in a tiny database because that's all you can do right now. And
Hmm.
that's okay as long
Yeah.
as there's documentation and understanding. And especially a data governance established early will help you build and scale and transfer from legacy systems to new systems.
What do you mean? How do you mean data governance?
Data governance is a set of standards and a group of people that help adhere to those standards. It's agreeing on definitions for things so that across the company, if you're talking about a definition for something or you're talking about a certain metric, everybody understands what that means. You're not using different dates to calculate it. You're not using different equations to calculate it. You're not filtering things out here or there. So those definitions are important. Data governance typically also covers security for data and who has access to it and who should have access to it. And then there may be what we usually call a center of excellence. And those are people who meet regularly and talk about the data challenges, make sure that documentation's up to date, that processes are happening, that data is being backed up. And it can be small based on the organization, or it can be completely, absolutely critical for larger organizations.
Wow. That's really clear. Data governance or governance in general can mean so many different things, and it's very cool to really think about it from a data perspective. Thank you for giving us that point of view. So, looking ahead at all these things changing out there in the IT world, what emerging technologies or methodologies are you excited about integrating into the 8-bit insight services?
I actually, I think that more exciting than what I can integrate with my company is the emerging tech that I find with clients. One of our goals is to elevate our communities, and that includes wanting to work with cutting edge partners who are impacting the world in a positive way. Things like sensor data for vertical farming or lab grown meat sensors, solar panel data, figuring out the most efficient ways to do solar panels, um, social community work and helping them find grants and apply for grants using the data to show their progress and to show the proof that they can do it. Um, I think that these innovations, these innovative companies are the most exciting part of my job is to see where they can go, how I can help them, how I can enable them, and then using the technology to do that. Um, Data is changing the world. Data is changing our survival, our ability to thrive, and our ability to be a strong global community. And I feel that it's our responsibility to be good stewards, ensuring that empathy and humanity remain involved. Even if we are offloading some thinking to AI, there's a lot of promise to AI. There's a lot of hype around AI. And I think that there are great ways for it to be integrated. But I think we need to keep humanity involved too. And I think that these problems can be solved with data. I think these problems can be solved with the help of AI and the help of humans who really believe that
Absolutely.
we can do this.
It's a collaborative effort.
Hmm.
It really is. Well,
Yeah.
this has been amazing. I've learned so much about data and so much about 8-bit, and I'm looking forward to a great future. And I just want to ask you, Sabrina, if this is a year out, would you join us again and let us know all of the changes and things that have happened to 8-bit Insights? Would you come back in a year or so?
I'd love to.
Oh, we'd love to have you back. And before we say goodbye, first off, or finally, how do we get a hold of you?
Oh, you can reach me at my website, 8bitinsights.com. You can email me, sabrina.jordan at 8bitinsights.com, or you can give me a call. You can find my number on our website too.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we will do that, and all that information will also be put in the show notes of this podcast. And so, with that, we're going to say goodbye.